Welcome to the Adventures of George Washington. I am your host, Professor Worthington. In this series, we will examine the life of the first President of the United States from his birth to his death. Each episode will feature a pivotal event in Washington's life and analyze the impact these events had on his philosophy and subsequent conduct. This video series aims to highlight both the positive and negative impacts of Washington's ideas and actions on modern society, either because we have followed his advice or because we have ignored it. When George Washington was 11 years old, his father Augustine died. During his lifetime, Augustine had accumulated land throughout the state of Virginia. George, the third oldest of the children, inherited the small homestead near Fredericksburg. Austin, the second oldest, inherited the farmland in Westmoreland County, and Lawrence, the oldest of the brothers, inherited the estate along the Potomac River, which he named Mount Vernon. Following the death of their father, Lawrence, who was in his mid-20s at the time, took on the role of George's protector. As a result, George spent more time at Mount Vernon than at his own estate in Fredericksburg, which was being managed by his mother Mary. Within a year of inheriting Mount Vernon, Lawrence married Anne Fairfax from the neighboring Belvoir estate. The Fairfaxes were the most politically and socially influential family in Virginia, and the marriage between Lawrence Washington and Anne Fairfax brought the two families closer together. George Washington formed a close friendship with Anne's younger brother, George William Fairfax, who, like many of young George Washington's close relationships, was his elder. In this case, Fairfax was 8 years older than Washington. Additionally, Anne's father, William, whom everyone called Colonel, served as a mentor for both of the young men. When George visited his mother in Fredericksburg or his brother Austin in Westmoreland, conversations centered around farming, horses, and life on the river. However, at Mount Vernon and Belvoir, the additional topics of stoicism, land acquisition, military service, and foreign adventure were discussed. Lawrence Washington, a well-educated gentleman, was assembling a personal library at Mount Vernon. At the same time, Colonel Fairfax had already amassed an extensive archive of books at Belvoir. Together, these two estates offered George Washington ample opportunities to further his self-education. Yet, not content with just reading books owned by other people, George Washington started to build his own collection of readings. One of the first documents collected by Washington was a poem titled True Happiness, which he hand-copied from a gentleman's magazine called the Monthly Intelligencer, a popular publication in the 18th century. George Washington's father had owned a collection of the magazine, which may have been transferred to Lawrence's library, and the magazine was probably also available in Colonel Fairfax's collection.
True happiness. These are the things which once possessed will make a life that's truly blessed. A good estate on healthy soil, not got by vice nor yet by toil. Round a warm fire a pleasant joke, with chimney ever free from smoke. A strength entire, a sparkling bowl. A quiet wife, a quiet soul. A mind as well as body whole. Prudent simplicity, constant friends. A diet which no art commends. A merry night without much drinking. A happy thought without much thinking. Each night by quiet sleeps made short. A will to be but what thou art. Possessed of these all else defy. And neither wish nor fear to die. These are the things which once possessed will make a life that's truly blessed.
While a portion of young Washington's heart may have longed for a simple life on a good estate alongside a quiet wife, another part yearned for adventure. He discovered that thrill in Andrew Ramsay's The Travels of Cyrus, a tale of a valiant military and political leader who rose to greatness through virtue. Cyrus was the son of Cambyses, who was the king of Persia, and Mandana, who was the daughter of the king of Media. As Ramsay tells the story, all empires transition through 4 political phases: valor, conquest, luxury, and anarchy. Media was currently in the phase of luxury, which meant that it had replaced virtues such as the quest for honor and pursuit of knowledge with vices such as the desire for splendor and love of flattery. When Cyrus was 14, his grandfather, the king of Media, requested that his grandson visit his kingdom for the first time. Before the journey, Mandana, fearful that Cyrus would be corrupted by the excesses of Medea, endeavored to educate Cyrus on the importance of virtue and foolishness of vice. She instilled in him the idea that noble virtues such as generosity and wisdom led to heroism, while vile vices such as pride and avarice led to unhappiness. When they arrived in Medea, the king was greatly impressed by the knowledge and nobility of his grandson. The people of the kingdom praised Cyrus to the point he became intoxicated with pride. Once again fearful that her son might fall victim to vice, Mandana reminded him of the necessity to live a virtuous life by telling him the story of Loges and Cygeus.
My son, it was formerly the custom at Thebes in Persia to raise to the throne, after the death of the king, the one of all his children who had the best understanding. When a prince has fine parts, he can choose able ministers, make proper use of their talents, and govern those who govern under him. This is a great secret of the art of reigning. Among the king's sons there were two who seemed of a superior genius. The elder, named Loges, loved talking. The younger, who was called Cygeus, was a man of few words. The first made himself admired by the charms of his wit. The second made himself loved by the goodness of his heart. Loges showed plainly, even while he endeavored to conceal it, that he spoke only to shine. Cygeus hearkened readily to others and looked upon conversation as a sort of commerce where each person ought to furnish something of his own. The one made the most thorny and perplexed affairs agreeable by the lively and shining strokes of wit he intermixed in all he said. The other threw light upon the obscurest points by reducing everything to simple principles. Loges affected mystery without being secret, and his politics were full of stratagems and artifice. Cygeus, impenetrable without being false, surmounted all obstacles by his prudence and courage. The one never displayed his talents, but to serve his ambition. The other frequently concealed his virtues, that he might taste the secret pleasure of doing good for its own sake. After the death of the king of Thebes, all the people got together in haste to choose a successor to the throne. 12 old men presided at the assembly to correct the judgment of the multitude, who are often carried away by prejudice, appearance, or passion. The eloquent Prince Loges made a long but fine harangue, wherein he set forth all the duties of a king, and assured them all that being so well acquainted with the duties, he would undoubtedly fulfill them. However, in a different manner, Prince Cygeus in a few words represented to the assembly the great hazards in the exercise of sovereign authority, and confessed an unwillingness to expose himself to them. But is not, added he, that I would shun any difficulties or dangers to serve my country, but I am afraid of being found unequal to the task of governing. The 12 elders decided in favor of Cygeus, but the multitude, being of superficial understandings, preferred the older brother, and raised by degrees a rebellion, under the pretext that injustice had been done to Loges. Troops were levied on both sides. Cygeus proposed to yield his right to his brother, in order to hinder the effusion of the blood of his countrymen, but his army would not consent to it. The chief men of both parties, seeing the miseries with which the state was ready to be overwhelmed, proposed the expedient of letting both the brothers reign, each a year, by turns. This form of government has many inconveniences, but it was preferred before a civil war, the greatest of all calamities. The 2 brothers applauded the proposal for peace, and Loges ascended the throne. He changed in a little time all the ancient laws of the kingdom. He was always listening to new projects, and to have a lively imagination was sufficient to raise a man to the highest employment. That which seemed excellent in speculation could not be executed without difficulty and confusion. His ministers, who had no experience, knew not that precipitate changes, how useful soever they may appear, are always dangerous. The neighboring nations took advantage from this weak administration to invade their country, and had it not been for the prudence and bravery of Cygeus, all had been lost, and the people must have submitted to a foreign yoke. His brother's year being expired, he ascended the throne, gained the confidence and love of his people, re-established the ancient laws, and by his wise conduct, even more than by his victories, drove the enemy out of the country. From that time Cygeus reigned alone, and it was decided in the Supreme Council of the old men that the king to be chosen for the future should not be the person who gave proofs of the quickest parts, but of the soundest judgment. They were of the opinion that to talk eloquently, or to be fruitful in experience and stratagems, were not talents so essential to a good governor as a just discernment in choosing, and a steadiness and courage in pursuing the best and wisest counsels.
Cyrus understood the moral of his mother's story and resolved to correct his behavior. Soon after, the Assyrians began to march toward an attack on Media. The king of Media assembled a council of war to decide their actions. As the king's generals recommended surrender, Cyrus listened intently and silently. When they finished speaking, the king asked his grandson for his opinion. Briefly and humbly, Cyrus recommended they counterattack the Assyrians at a choke point he noticed they would pass through as they marched toward the city. Courageously, he volunteered to lead the ambush. When the fighting was done, Media was the victor. Looking at the dead and wounded after the battle, Cyrus was filled with generosity and humanity and ordered that warriors from Assyria as well as Media be cared for. Following this conflict, Mandana wished to return to Persia with Cyrus, but her father insisted that Cyrus stay with him in Media. Mandana conceded and once again beseeched Cyrus to remain virtuous. Furthermore, she left Hystaspes, one of her husband's most trusted military commanders, to serve as a mentor for Cyrus. In addition to being a skilled military leader, Ramsay described Hystaspes as a great politician and a great philosopher, as well as a man equally able and disinterested. During his time in Media, Cyrus maintained his virtue and soon fell in love with a moral young princess named Cassandana. Initially, they were unable to marry due to political schemes and superstitious beliefs. However, as a result of their persistence, they eventually won the approval of all their naysayers and were wed in a grand celebration. Cyrus and Cassandana then embarked on a journey where they met the Persian priest Zoroaster, who taught them how to use the sciences of agriculture, anatomy, entomology, astronomy, and the other wonders of nature to gain a greater understanding of God. He also acquainted them with the mysteries of Eastern wisdom and secrets of an infinite wisdom diffused throughout the universe. Cyrus and Cassandana returned to Persia, where they became the parents of 2 sons and 2 daughters. Cassandana abruptly died during the prime of her life, and to help mollify his grief, Cyrus returned to Zoroaster and had conversations that contributed to his recovery. After this, Cyrus embarked on a journey to study the laws, manners, and militaries of the different republics of Greece in hopes of finding new ways to improve Persia. In his book, Ramsay combined classic religion with science and mythology to provide a multiplicity of potential sources in the search for knowledge and truth. Officially, Ramsay was a recent convert to Catholicism, but his spiritual perspective remained consistent with deist thought. The story of Cyrus also gave Ramsay the opportunity to critique by proxy the governments of his time through the dialogues between Cyrus and the leaders of the various Greek republics he encountered along his journey. 2 of the more informative governments that Cyrus visited during his journey were Athens and Sparta. Athens was a democracy. To Ramsay, the excessive liberty of democracies led to anarchy because the selfishness, passion, and ambition of the people destroyed their love of country as they pursued egotistical aspirations over the common good of the state. Sparta was a mixed constitution consisting of monarchy, oligarchy, and democracy. This was representative of the British government, with a monarchy in the form of a king, an oligarchy in the form of an elite group of legislators or advisors, such as the House of Lords, and a democracy in the form of the elected House of Commons. Here again, Ramsay was uncomfortable with power resting in the hands of the people. He feared that their unsatiable appetite for power would weaken the authority of the king. He clearly saw a division where one class was disposed to command with moderation, while the other class was to obey with readiness. Each member of society had a duty to contribute to the prosperity of the kingdom, regardless of their status. The benevolent monarch sacrificed personal interest and individual liberty to set an example of virtue and promote the public good. The elite lawmakers worked to balance the extremes of tyrannical monarchy and anarchic democracy by making and enforcing virtuous laws. And finally, the humble subjects enjoyed order, unity, and stability by obeying the laws and performing their labors. Books like The Travels of Cyrus, not only transporting George Washington to distant places and eras he could never visit, but more importantly, they emphasized lessons on virtue that he would recall when confronting his own military and political challenges. Thank you for watching this episode of The Adventures of George Washington. Each week we will bring you a new video that chronicles key events in the life of America's greatest military and political leader. If you found the content useful or entertaining, please subscribe. We look forward to being with you again in the next episode. I have been your host, Professor Worthington. For more details on the information presented in this video, you should read The Travels of Cyrus by Andrew Ramsay, available at archive.org, and George Washington, A Life in Books by Kevin Hayes. See this video's description for a complete list of references.